All right, so let's get going on today's meeting. So what we're going to be doing today is we are going to continue our look at long-term memory and long-term memory structure. But whereas last time we kind of introduced the idea of long-term memory and took a look at things that we can discover with memory that is working in the typical fashion when memory is working right, today we're going to see what we can learn when memory goes wrong. So when people are unable to remember things that they typically would be able to, what does that allow us to infer and conclude about the way that our mind works? So last time I mentioned that one of the things that psychology has recently discovered is the idea that memory is reconstructive, the idea that your memory is not stored as files in some sort of filing system, but is stored as these disparate pieces of a memory in different places. And when you remember something, you actually reconstruct that memory. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail in coming classes. But one of the big implications of this is that this discovery, and it was in the 90s, was one of the first indications or first pieces of evidence that we could actually have false memories. So previously, people believed that you can forget things, but you would never remember something that didn't happen, because why would you? If you have a file that got filed somewhere, you either find it, in which case you remember it, or you don't find it, in which case you forget it. But you're not going to find a false file if it works according to that filing system metaphor. On the other hand, if you are reconstructing memory out of pieces that you have scattered around in your memory system, it's quite possible that you grab the wrong piece, or you grab multiple wrong pieces and forge them together into what you believe to be a real memory, but what actually turns out to be a false memory. So that's the idea of memory as a reconstructive system. But today we're going to focus on specifically not when things are working right, but what happens when things work incorrectly. What happens when you have basically a system crash in your memory systems, and now all of a sudden you either have an inability to recall events that you have stored, or you also have an inability maybe to remember events that are occurring to you now. So not only sometimes we have two kind of impairments in memory for things that happened in our past, which is retrograde deficits, and then new memories have an inability to form that's anterograde. So we're going to see an extreme example of that that shows the different memory systems and the evidence that we have that these are actually real different memory systems and not just somebody's definitions. All right, so before we get to that, we're going to do just a quick recap on the types of long-term memory, explicit memory, and implicit memory. And then we're going to talk about the evidence for different memory structures, all in a lead up to see to get a case study, Living Without Memory, the case of Clive Wearing. So as we're going to see, Clive Wearing has severe memory impairments. He has both retrograde and anterograde amnesia. And yet, even though some of his memory is extremely impaired, other aspects of his memory are still intact. So we're going to see what implications that make or give for our understanding of how memory is represented and structured in your mind. All right, so quick recap. Types of long-term memory. We have explicit memory, and this is memory that is used with awareness, memories that you are aware of. So these are things like episodic memories, memories of what happened to you during your lifetime, and also semantic memories, memories that of information and knowledge that you have, such as historical dates, the alphabet, what words mean, semantic concepts that you're learning in this class would all be stored in that semantic memory. So this is explicit memory, memory that you are aware that you have stored in your memory systems. And then last time we introduced the idea of implicit memory, and these are memories that are used without awareness, things like procedural memories, memories for how to do certain things, how to move in certain ways, like shoot a basketball, drive a car, walk, even something as simple as that. We took a look at priming, and this is the memory that is revealed when one stimulus makes your reaction to a second stimulus faster, which is that priming idea. So the only way that occurs is if you have a memory association between the two stimuli. So again, the example was if I say Batman, you're going to be much more quick to recognize Robin than if I said Batman, you would not be as quick to recognize pineapple. And the reason is because Batman and Robin are associated because of a memory that you have formed, whereas Batman and pineapple are not. And then the last implicit memory was conditioning. And this again is typically emotional reactions to stimuli that used to be neutral. So you can learn to be afraid of certain stimuli through experiences. And you might have no idea why you're particularly afraid of something. You can't bring that memory to an explicit awareness. However, you are being conditioned to have that fear response to that stimuli. And just kind of talking about that reminded me of the positive aspect of that, where you have positive memories that you don't really understand where those got programmed. And that is the basis of just about all advertising campaigns. So I don't know anybody who has ever watched an advertisement and said to themselves, you know what, I just saw this advertisement and I saw Serena Williams and she was drinking Coke. And I really want to be a good tennis player, so I'm going to drink Coke too, because that's probably why she's a great tennis player. The advertisement convinced me. Advertisements aren't rational like that. What they do, though, is they make you associate positive emotions with a particular product. And they do that implicitly. You don't understand or you're not aware that those are the associations that they make. And then what happens is when you go to a grocery store, you're scanning the items and you're like, okay, I have that soft drink, that soft drink, that soft drink, that soft drink. And you have neutral emotion, neutral emotion, neutral emotion until you get to Coke. And if you're a fan of Serena Williams, all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I feel fondness or a positive emotion for this Coke. I'm going to choose that instead of saying, I want to be more like Serena Williams. She drinks Coke, so I'm going to drink Coke. So that's a conditioning memory. And again, one of the nice examples for the procedural memory was that idea of trying to understand how you walk, which is if you ever try to explicitly explain how you walk, it is almost impossible. If you try to program a robot to walk, it is also took decades. So people have been walking for hundreds of thousands of years. And yet it's only been within the last few years that we actually have been able to make robots that walked. And just as an aside, I did mention last time those videos where they actively tried to Spartan kick these robots and how I would not want to be one of the people in those videos if and when AI takes over. So I found a few. They actually had a compilation, and I'm not joking. Like this, and these are dog robots, and this is like they're literally kicking the dog. Where if you are aware of like TV tropes and storytelling tropes, kicking the dog is one of the ways, even in slow mo, kicking the dog is one of the ways to establish that somebody's evil, right? You just have them take out somebody that is beloved, or actually have them kick a dog. So yeah, I mean, I would not want to be. I would want my face blurred in these videos. It is quite impressive, though, the amount of balance that they were able to achieve. But at the same time, wouldn't want to be that guy. All right, so evidence for different memory structures. Why is it that we now believe in or are convinced that there's long-term memory, short-term memory, and working memory? Why is it that we accept the division of explicit memory and implicit memory and say things like, well, implicit memory has procedural memory, and it has priming, and it has conditioning? The reason for that, or one of the sources of evidence for that, are the specific functional deficits that are found in patients with certain types of issues, usually brain damage. And what happens in many of these individuals is that one aspect of memory will be impaired. So the deficit, however it's caused, impacts one aspect of memory, but importantly, other aspects of memory remain intact. And that is very convincing evidence that if you have one aspect of memory that is impaired and one that is intact, your deficit has impacted the system, that separate system, that serves the first aspect of memory, but has not interfered or affected the system that services the other type of memory. So that's kind of arbitrary and abstract. Let's put some actual words on it. If you have lost your long-term memory and you cannot form, let's say that you have anterograde amnesia, you can't form new memories, and yet your working memory is intact. There's no impairment in your working memory. That is good evidence that long-term memory and working memory are controlled by two different systems, and they're represented by two different representations. They're implemented by two different mechanisms in your mind. So long-term memory is separate from working memory. There's evidence for that if we find people whose long-term memory is affected, but their working memory is not. And the same thing with short-term memory versus long-term memory. If you can store things in short-term memory, but they don't get transferred into long-term memory, again, that is good evidence that those two systems are actually separate. And that is the reason why my ideas of blue memory for things that are blue and Spider-Man memory for all things related to Spider-Man, that's one of the reasons why nobody will ever really accept these ideas, because there is no person in the history of the world who has forgotten what blue is and yet still remembered what Spider-Man was, or vice versa. Totally forgotten what Spider-Man was and didn't know what Spider-Woman was and forgot all their Spider-Man related knowledge and yet still knew what blue was. That has never happened, indicating that those two proposed memory systems aren't actually real. They don't actually exist. They're not separate in our mind. All right. So that is the setup for what we're going to take a look at today. So we're going to focus today on a documentary. It was Life Without Memory, the case of Clive Wearing. So this is Clive Wearing there with his wife. And you're going to find out more about him. But he was a very accomplished conductor. He was one of the foremost world experts on composers of the Italian Renaissance. And at one point in his adult life, he contracted the virus herpes simplex encephalitis, and that damaged his hippocampus, and that led to anterograde and retrograde amnesia. So he could not form new memories, and he could not recall old memories. So Clive Wearing, we're going to take a look at his life. We're going to see what aspects of his memory are massively impaired. And then we're also going to take a look at what aspects of his memory are still intact. And when a case like this occurs, it becomes a case study for memory researchers, because as much as this is impacting his life, and we'll see the impact of that, for a researcher trying to understand memory, this is a opportunity, an unfortunate opportunity, but an opportunity to discover what aspects of memory are separate, how do they operate, what is still intact, and what isn't intact. Now, one of the last things I'll mention before we actually start watching the documentary is we're going to stop and discuss things that are happening in the documentary as we go along. But one of the things that I always find, and it's very difficult to kind of put into words, but it's the idea that some of this is not going to make sense. And what I mean by that, you're going to think to yourself, well, he can't remember any previous memories. So how does he remember this? Right? He can't remember this information. So how does he mention this? And he can't form new memories, but how is he able to do this? So there's a lot of that just going to be going on. And those are excellent questions, but I don't want you to get hung up on it, because sometimes we get mired in the weeds. And that observation, I think, is driven home by what I'm quickly realizing in this course has been one of my favorite psychologists of all time. I'm going to give him that honorary title, which is Mitch Hedberg. So Mitch Hedberg had a bit that talks about this, and I'll just let you view it, and then I'll just mention quickly the importance of it.
Oh, yeah, man. I saw a commercial that said, "Forget everything you know about slipcovers." So I did. And it was a load off my mind. Then the commercial tried to sell slipcovers, but I didn't know what the hell they were.
All right, so we're going to see in this in this video with Clive Wearing that he has many, many different abilities. And some of those, sometimes you'll think, well, they contradict other things, right? It's like he forgot about his entire life. He doesn't know if he can play the piano, and yet he'll still approach the piano, sit down to the piano, and be able to play the piano. So there's a lot of these kind of moments where you might get caught up with it, just the same way that Mitch Hedberg forgot everything about slipcovers, and then somebody tried to sell him slipcovers, and he forgot what slipcovers were. So just kind of keep that in mind. We're going to have to stay fluid and kind of go with the flow on this one a little bit. But they are important questions, but don't lose the focus of what we're trying to take a look at. So just so that you know that you're not alone on this, I have had this issue when I've watched this documentary too. And other people have made the mistake of misinterpreting things that Clive Wearing has shown us. So this is an article from the Standard about 10 years ago. And the title is The Man Who Forgot His Wife. And as you watch this documentary, you will see with absolutely no question whatsoever, Clive Wearing has not forgotten his wife. Completely. He has not forgotten all aspects of her. And you'll see what I mean when we get to the video. So again, much of his memory is impaired. Some of his memory is intact. This is evidence for different memory structures. And we'll end it with a few quotes from the book that Deborah Waring, his wife, wrote on the subject. So this is Orlando de Lasso. And I'm bringing him up because Orlando de Lasso, he was a composer of the late Renaissance, not a household name, but Clive Wearing was the world's expert, the foremost expert on the music of Orlando de Lasso in the world. He was the guy. You wanted to know about Orlando de Lasso or put on some of his music, you went to Clive Wearing. And in her book, Forever Today, a memoir of love and amnesia, Deborah Waring mentions some things about the impact of this life. And she goes, when Barbara, you'll actually see Barbara, was studying Clive Wearing and his memory impairments, she goes, the saddest answer came when Barbara asked him to name all the composers he could think of. He could name only 4 in the space of 1 minute: Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, and Haydn, the composers he would have known best in childhood. After 25 years faithfully studying the life and work of Orlando Lasses, even that name escaped him. So he has some episodic or some semantic memory that's still there. He can name those 4 composers that he learned in his childhood. But somebody that he was the foremost expert on, that he spent 25 years studying, gone. Couldn't even remember that person's name. Just to kind of talk about how important memory is for our life experience. She mentioned, I watched Christmas on TV. Clive paced and said, never mind the television. Just tell me how long I have been ill. He did not sleep much, but was up and down at night asking, how long, how long, how long? Just tell me how long. And the minutes and the hours were all the same question after same question without respite, piling up in my mind like sawdust. With every hour, it seemed we were disintegrating. So this idea of memory kind of grounding you and kind of keeping you afloat in this world is something that we oftentimes don't appreciate until we see an example like this where memory is gone. All right, and then not to leave it on a downbeat, I'll end with this quote before we turn to the video. Love was always my way of getting through to Clive, whatever the circumstances. Love stopped him in his tracks. Love brought him up against what was important. Yes, he might not have any idea about what was going on or where he was or anything that had happened to him in the whole of his existence. But one thing he did know for sure, he knew he loved me. He knew I loved him. He knew we were one. He knew that came before everything. So with that note, let's turn to Clive Wearing and the life and impacts that he had.
how we got here?
No.
You don't remember sitting down?
No.
I reckon we've been here about 10 minutes at least.
Well, I've no knowledge of it. My eyes have started working now, and all I've seen the whole time I've been seeing in it all is that.
And do you feel absolutely normal?
Not absolutely normal, no. Completely and completely confused.
Confused?
Yes. You've never eaten anything, never tasted anything, never touched anything, never smelled anything. What right have you assumed you're alive?
But you are?
Well, apparently, yes. But I'd like to know what the hell's been going on.
Clive was an outstanding musician.
He would take his work very, very seriously. At the same time, he loved music so much that he just really threw himself into it totally.
Clive was a musician of enormous integrity.
He was the world's expert on Lassus, one of the 3 or 4 great composers of the Renaissance.
And he also worked a great deal in contemporary music and was chorus master of the London Sinfonietta, which was Europe's foremost group.
Music flows out of him, whether he's singing or playing or conducting.
Clive Waring, through a cruel twist of fortune, shows us how fundamental consciousness and memory are to our lives.
All right. So that's Deborah. That's his wife that just walked into the door. Did he remember his wife? Yeah, 100%. That is not how you greet a stranger, right? That emotional reaction, the singing, the hugging, you'll watch, he does not do that for everybody. So in that case, the article might have been right about his explicit knowledge of his wife. So you might ask him, are you married? And be like, I don't know. Do you know the name of your wife? I don't know. But as soon as she walks through the door, his implicit memory, either the conditioning, the feelings of love that he is associated with that person, procedural memory, he breaks out into song, he goes to hug her. Clearly, that is still intact. So clearly he has implicit memories of his wife. Have you seen me before? No. First time. Again, no explicit memory that he knows this person, and yet hugging, kissing, all over.
A little bit hard. There's nobody else I care about in the world. Oh?
Oh, darling. So how are you feeling this morning?
I'm conscious for the first time. It's the first time I've seen anybody talk.
You've not been conscious before? I've been here before this
I
morning.
haven't seen you before.
No, you haven't?
No. I've not seen anything at all before. I've been completely blind the whole time. No taste, so this is the first taste I've had.
That's the first coffee you've had?
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers. And how are you sitting?
So that's one of the things that, I'll try to stop less as we go on, but that's one of the things that sometimes confuses people, because he's like, I have no taste, no touch, never had consciousness before. And yet he looks down and he's like, yeah, here's some coffee. And I know this is safe to drink, right? So you would have to at some point have learned that coffee is served in those cups, that's what's in his drink, that's what's in his cup, and that it's safe to drink. So clearly there's some knowledge that has been retained. He still knows the language. So clearly there's still some semantic knowledge that has been retained, but there's a massive deficit, at the very least, in his episodic memory.
Absolutely normal. The first time.
Colour?
Yes. I've never seen anything the whole time I've been ill. No black and white, nothing.
Do you remember me arriving?
No. I don't remember any arrivals, or I don't remember writing any letters. Nothing to do with me consciously. I mean, unconscious writing.
What are you doing here?
Well, I don't know, presumably paying patients, but I mean, that's the first time I've seen any cards.
Is it?
Yes.
Do you remember starting the game? It all started with a headache. Clive came home one day and said he had a very bad headache. The headache didn't lift, it didn't respond to analgesics. By the 4th day, he developed quite a high fever. And on the evening of the 4th day, for a little while, he forgot his daughter's name. By the 5th day, he was very delirious.
Well,
Clive suffered from viral encephalitis, which has led to the damage of the left and the right temporal lobes, plus a good portion of the left frontal lobe. Now, the temporal lobes contain a structure called the hippocampus, which we know is implicated in memory function, and in Clive it has almost certainly been completely destroyed in both sides of his brain. It's this that's primarily responsible for his severe memory impairment. In addition, the damage to his frontal lobes also causes a number of additional memory problems, which are manifest mostly in terms of him repeating himself a lot and generally showing highly emotional behaviour.
Clive's world now consists of a moment with no past to anchor it and no future to look ahead to. It is a blinkered moment. He sees what is right in front of him, but as soon as that information hits the brain, it fades. Nothing makes an impression, nothing registers. Everything goes in perfectly well because he has all his faculties, his intellect is virtually intact, and he perceives his world as you or I do. But as soon as he's perceived it and looked away, it's gone for him. So, it's a moment-to-moment consciousness, as it were, a time vacuum. And everything before that moment is completely void. And he feels as if he's awakening afresh the whole time.
Lovely hand you got. Beautiful, marvelous tickets. Fantastic. I'm awake for the first time. You're the first person I've seen.
It's very nice to meet you.
How long has it been?
It's been about 2.5 years now, Mr. Graham.
Imagine one night, 2.5 years long.
Well, no.
Terribly nice. Not seen anything till now. Not even anything before this game. I've given the impression of being conscious awake. Not true.
He always thinks he's been awake for about 2 minutes. And that's why he looks at his watch all the time to record it, to record the fact, I've woken up, this is an important event, therefore I will write it down in my diary. So he writes, 11:54 a.m. I am now completely awake for the first time. And he underlines first time. Patience begins, because he's always playing patience. And the whole diary, every page, is a succession of entries saying almost the same thing, of first awakeness. And when he goes back and looks at his own entries, he doesn't acknowledge that they are genuine. He says, he knows it's his handwriting, but as far as he's concerned, he was unconscious when he wrote them. So he quite often, he'll score out what he's written before. And so his life is an ever-repeating moment of first awakening. The strongest thing in his life, I believe, and his diaries bear that out, is his love for me. And that's absolutely raw. And each time I walk into that room, it is as if it's the first time he's seen me for years.
Good heavens above! Well, darling.
Hello. You surprised to see me?
The first time I've seen anybody at all. The first person I've seen.
You have not seen me before this
No.
morning?
No, I haven't.
I have been here. So how...
But one thing that I just wanted to mention was his insistence that you are the first person that I've ever seen, right? So that he keeps saying that. It's like, oh, are you surprised to see me? And he goes, yes, you're the first person that I've ever seen. I've never seen anybody before except you. All right, there we go. So why is that not necessarily true? Or what about his actions indicate that he at some level has memory of people before? So one thing, he recognizes what a person is, even though he's never seen any of them before. But let's say that you were living in this world and your entire existence, you were alone, right? Your entire existence, you had never come across another individual. And then today, all of a sudden, you turn the corner and there's another human being. Would your reaction be, oh, hey, you know what? I've never seen a person before. No, you would freak out and you would probably jump up and down and you would probably be like, oh my gosh, like, how long have you been here? Like, just, vomit questions all over them trying to figure out what's going on, right? None of that with Clive Owen. So his explicit memory is that I've never seen a person before. You're the first one. But implicitly, he kind of realizes it's not a novel situation. Yeah, it's really. I mean, he clearly does have, like, he knows what a person is. He knows all that, and they'll get into like his semantic knowledge later, because one of the things that you would need to know to basically be like, oh, this is something that I've seen before, is like an episodic memory of it, right? Like, oh, I remember in my childhood I saw people before. So the fact that he's like, well, I've never seen anybody ever before, is a good indication that at least his episodic memory is just gone. Like, he doesn't remember seeing anybody before, so he can't base his reactions on that kind of information. But at the same time, there's this implicit memory that, okay, this isn't the novel situation that my explicit memory is saying, and then he reacts in a more appropriate way.
Not been conscious before? I've been here before this morning.
I haven't seen you before.
No, you haven't?
No. I've not seen anything at all before. I've been completely blind the whole time.
You don't remember me arriving at all?
No. No, I don't remember that you arrived in the mood at all.
No.
No idea at all.
But you know who I am? Or do you kiss all women like that?
You know I love you. I don't kiss anybody
Yes, I
else.
do know. I do know. You've written it all over your diary. Look. I bet you that if I look to see what you've written, you haven't mentioned me on that page.
No.
You've mentioned me on this page. My first thought, I adore Deborah for eternity.
That's right.
People's entries in the diary are rubbish. What does that mean?
No.
So before he gets to the rubbish, I actually made an error before. It does look like he remembers his wife's name, because he writes it in the diary when she's not around.
Did you write that?
I've never conscious knowledge of it at all, no. You're showing it me now for the first time.
Is it your handwriting?
Yes, it is. But I know nothing about it at all.
So how do you think it got there?
I do. I presume the doctor don't know.
But you must...
No, I haven't. You listen to me, please, for heaven's sake. When I say no, I mean exactly that. I haven't seen the book at all till now.
No, all I'm saying...
No, that means I haven't seen it, I have no knowledge of it at all. That's all. There's no knowledge of that book at all. It's entirely new to me. But just use your intelligence, and let's have a comment which is intelligent.
But who would put that in?
I don't know, but no. Oh, for heaven's sake, use your intelligence, for heaven's sake. I haven't read the funny thing. Well, use your intelligence.
Clive gets extraordinary.
Okay, so just very quickly, the outbursts that he does have occasionally, they have hypothesized that that's due to his frontal lobe brain damage. If you remember, not his hippocampus was damaged, but also his frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is your executive functioning. It's basically what allows you to control yourself. So he's slightly impaired as that as well. Plus the fact that, as you're going to see later, this situation would be massively, massively frustrating, and just frustrating all the time.
Really angry. And who wouldn't? Because here you're not dealing with somebody who is demented, who is oblivious, who is gaga. You are dealing with a perfectly lucid, highly intelligent man who has been robbed of knowledge of his own life. And he feels deeply humiliated to be put in that position. Very, very frustrated that he can't grasp what's wrong with him, because even as you're telling him, he's forgetting the previous sentence.
A form of memory which probably distinguishes human beings perhaps from all other animals. He's lost the highest form of memory, the form of memory that enables you to relate yourself to the past and project yourself into the future. So, in a sense, he feels like a man adrift.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't heard a note of music, seen any music, had any contact with music at all.
You're still a very good conductor and a very, very good player. And you still sing with a beautiful voice.
Well, it's completely unknown to me.
Do you think if you sat down at the
I
organ...
dread to think. That's a private thing for me. I don't know what will happen, do I?
I know, because I've heard you. And you play beautifully, still.
I haven't heard a note of music. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Maria
never forget how to ride a bicycle. Well, to Clive, singing, playing, sight reading, score reading, music is as automatic as riding a bicycle or eating a meal or getting dressed. It's an ingrained skill. It's something you never forget. When Clive finishes a piece, the reason he almost always goes into that sort of belching, choking, fitting convulsion is because the moment the music stops, he's let down out of what was a sort of safety net for him. And suddenly he's lost again. Whatever the damage, however devastating.
So just real quick, that belching, kind of convulsing aspect of it, not really sure why that's the case. It might have to do between somehow switching systems, but if you're convulsing like that, then your area of your brain that controls your muscle movements has to somehow be implicated in that. So either there's some sort of activity cascade that is going on in those areas that he can't control until it calms down, or maybe parts of those areas have now been through brain plasticity used for other functions. We're not really sure why that actually occurs.
Devastating the damage. His being, his center, his soul is absolutely functioning as it ever did. The very fact that he is so despairing, so much in anguish, so angry, so much in love with me, those are all real human passions. And he's showing them almost to the exclusion of everything else. All he shows us is raw human passion, straight from the heart of the mind.
No?
You really think it was 67?
No idea what it is.
In 1985, Clive Wearing was stricken with viral encephalitis, leaving him with a profound memory deficit. Now, at the age of 60, he remains a prisoner of the present moment. He has very little memory of his life either before or after his illness. Because of concern for his safety, it has never been possible for Clive to live independently. He initially spent 7 years in a London hospital, 7 months in a general medical ward, and the rest of the time in an acute psychiatric ward. At the time, Britain had no long-term residential facilities for individuals with brain injury. In 1989, Ticehurst House Hospital, located in rural England, opened a specialized brain injury rehabilitation service. Clive moved there in 1992, and he lives there today. His wife, Deborah, visits him as often as possible. His memories of her and his feelings for her make these visits very emotional for them both.
I knew you were coming. I could see you through the window.
What we try to provide for Clive is a quiet, calm atmosphere, basically because he has no memory for events leading up to the current moment. Anything which really places a demand to know what's happening is upsetting for him. So he doesn't like going to places where he's unfamiliar. He doesn't really like visiting local towns or visiting places where there are lots of people, because for him, he will keep waking up, as he puts it, in these strange places, not knowing where he is. Whereas if he's here in the house or going for walks in the ground, then it's less demanding on his memory and he remains much calmer. We try to train the staff so that they don't ask Clive questions or begin discussions which put a load on his memory. For example, if you ask Clive, "How are you today?" there's an implicit demand on, well, I'm better today than I was yesterday. And he gets quite upset, and he will then start to talk about how he's been ill and how he can see and hear for the first time. So what we do is talk about the here and now. We ask him if he'd like a coffee. We enter into conversation, and Clive is still an excellent conversationalist, but it's all about current events. It's about the surroundings. So we might comment on all the sun shining out of the window, but we wouldn't say, oh, it's a nice day today, because that implies that he knows what day it is and he knows what the weather was like yesterday, and so on. So we have to try to be careful not to place those demands on his memory, because he then does become upset, and we want him to have a calm and content life.
Okay, so that is a great example of two things. Number one, just how foundational memory is to just about everything that we do. So you wouldn't really ever think that if somebody asked you, oh, it's a nice day today, that they're placing demands on your memory, or that you even have to use memory, right? You can just take a look outside and then go, yeah, it is a nice day today. But as they mentioned in that phrase is the idea that, well, we got to compare today to some other day, and that requires memory. So just one nice little example of just how foundational and oftentimes hidden the memory demands are that we place on ourselves, that we can normally handle, but not people with memory impairments. And then as a corollary to this, if you are dealing with somebody with memory impairments, do try to do what they did and mold your language and shape your conversations in a way that allows them to participate. Because one of the things that does happen to people oftentimes when they start losing their memory, when they start having memory impairments, is they will socially isolate, because oftentimes it's just difficult to have a conversation. So they can't hang out with their friends anymore because they'll not be able to follow the conversation because they can't remember things that were said 2 minutes ago. They'll bring up the same things over and over again, and they can sense the awkwardness. And eventually it just gets to a point where, unless you have trained people or put in the effort yourself, they just decide that it's just better to stay isolated rather than try to engage.
I didn't know you were here. What have you got there?
I brought you some cakes.
Oh, I feel kisses. Aren't these better than men?
I think so, yes. I'd go along with that.
Oh, good.
Would you like a Danish pastry?
It's a lovely idea.
Would you like one?
I would, actually.
Oh, good. We've got enough too, that's nice.
Yes, one each.
Good.
Are you all right?
Oh, thank you very much. Sorry, they're rather large, aren't they?
And ladies separate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take the small one.
Oh, this is enormous. Where did the whole lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, have a serviette.
Oh, no, take that.
Make it easier.
Oh, that sounds like a male name. Serviette who?
Serviette.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Serviette, yes.
One of the things that characterises Clive's day is that he continually makes entries in his diary. Now, I say makes entries in his diary rather than keeps a diary, because in fact he's not keeping the diary. It is an inner compulsion to record the momentous event of waking up, because Clive's perception of his own condition is that because he has no memory whatsoever up to the current 10, 20 seconds, or maybe half a minute, depending on whether there have been distractors, any proactive interference. On the whole, his conscious working span memory is that current minute. So everything else behind the minute is blank. So everything until now is unknown and is void. So he uses the analogy of feeling as if he has just woken up. He says it's like just waking up for the first time. It's like just becoming conscious. It's as if I have been unconscious for however many years. And because this is a continual state, unless he's actually engaged on a conversation or on playing Patience of Solitaire, which he does a lot, or on playing the piano, or on taking a walk, unless his mind is elsewhere engaged, that is his experience of life, which is, oh, it's as if I've just woken up. Oh, you're the first person I've seen. Oh, I haven't, you know. And it's this amazement that from, I mean, can you imagine what would it be like if you were unconscious and you just came to, but you didn't have a lot of people around your bed saying, oh, you've been unconscious, you're in hospital. You've just got people eating a meal or watching TV as if nothing has happened. So he is habituated to that condition. He realizes that it's not surprising, but he uses that as an analogy for the experience of having no memory. It's as if I've just woken up. And because for him it is momentous, he has to write it down. And he has to write it down on any available surface. If the diary is in front of him, he will write it down there. He will record the time, 10:50 a.m., awake first time, 10, and then he looks at the previous entry, which was 10:48 a.m., awake first time, and he says, no, I wasn't awake then. That wasn't me. That wasn't proper awakeness. This is the first real awakeness. So he goes through the diary, scoring out previous entries and underlining the current new entry, because this now is the real awakeness. All the previous awakenesses are unknown to me. So what he's saying something about ego. He's saying something about identity. He's saying, I know now. I know this moment now. I have no conscious recollection of those previous entries in my handwriting, though I acknowledge obviously they were me. Therefore, this is the real awakeness, and you have to take notice of that. So he'll underline it many times. And what's interesting is that over the years, as the diaries have stacked up, the diaries, the pages have become written in a more and more frenzied way, as if to say it's really important that you take notice of this. Just as a prisoner has to scratch the fact of his existence on the prison cell wall, I was here today and I'm alive now. The world, you have to know this. That's what Clive is doing with his diary. And I think he's actually telling us something quite important about his perception of his condition. And he is the best eyewitness for his condition.
So, real quick, I don't know if anybody here, I hope not, I don't know if anybody here has experienced lost time that you were awake and mobile, but you just cannot remember what occurred. And it happened to me one time. I was on my way to IUSB, and I was cycling in. And between the time that I was on my bicycle and the time when I got to my office, I fell down. I was wearing a helmet. It hit my head on the side of the sidewalk, I'm assuming. But I have no recollection from the period of time when I was approaching a turn to when I was in my office and realized that I had 5 minutes before my class and I was still in my cycling clothes. I remember going to class, trying to open up my PowerPoints and not remembering if we had already done the lecture that I was opening up or whether we needed to do it today. And I realized something was wrong, and I remember going to Dr. Ritchie's office and saying, I don't think I'm okay. And then she saw the skid marks on my face, and she was like, yeah, we're canceling class, and we're just letting that, you're going to the hospital. But that time, gone. And it bothers me. It bothers me that somehow, and I had my phone recording my trip, and I remember some Good Samaritan stopped and was like, are you okay? And I answered them, yeah, I'm fine. And I got back on my bike, and I cycled into school, and I made it up to my office. I took out my key, I opened the door, I sat down, and I don't remember any of it. And it's not coming back, and it bothers me. And that's 15 minutes of my life. Clive Wearing lost, 40 years of his experiences. So I can't imagine just how monumental that would feel to lose that amount of time.
Because
I've nothing to say about it. It's just like death. No thoughts of any kind, no dreams, no difference between day and night, no sight, no sound, no taste, no touch, no smell, exactly like death. No difference between day and night. No thoughts, nothing. No dreams, nothing at all. Any question you have, just answer, I don't know. There's nothing to say. No dreams, no sight, no sound, no taste, no touch, no smell, nothing at all, no thoughts, nothing.
Okay, that is one of my favorite examples of both priming and procedural memory. His description of the fact that he has never tasted, touched, seen, smelled, or seen anything before. That, again, is not how you explain that the first time, right? You would say, like, you know what, I've never had sight. I've never seen anything before. I've never tasted anything before. I've never felt anything before. I've never heard anything before. If you compare this with his statement of this in the first part, it was much slower. In the first part, where they were on the bench in the park, and he's like, no, I'm awake for the first time. No taste, no touch, no smell, no, I'll lose count. No taste. Oh, I'm not Clive Wearing. No taste, no touch, no smell, no sound, no sight, right? It takes him longer. Here, it's like an auctioneer. It's like no taste, no touch, no sound, no smell, no sight. I don't know what to tell you. No taste, no taste, no touch, no smell, no sound, no sight. It's because he has done this so many times that now, through implicit memory, through priming, taste signals touch, touch signals sight, sight signals hearing, hearing signals the last one, and you can see he's learned this and he has that memory for it.
Since how long ago?
2 years, that's all I know. The whole time I've been ill, nothing at all, no thoughts, nothing.
What's it like now?
I can see.
Mm.
First time I had any evidence I was alive.
And do you feel sort of normal now?
Yes. Since I sat down here, I don't remember sitting down here.
You don't remember sitting down?
No, I never see any human being now. I can see you fully of it now. No touch, no smell, nothing at all.
Do you know what happened to you?
No.
Any idea?
No idea at all. Just like death.
Do you know how long you've been like
No
this?
idea, just lived like years, that's all.
When do you, any idea what year you got ill?
No.
Have a guess.
Sometime in the 80s.
Sometime in the 80s, yes.
That's all
Early 80s, mid 80s, late
No idea,
80s?
I can't remember.
Guess?
Middle 80s.
Middle 80s, yeah. That's correct.
Mm.
And do you know what year it is now?
No.
Have a guess.
It was in the 90s, I suppose.
Yeah, how far in would you
No
say?
idea. Anything between 91 and 99, I don't know.
You've no feeling for that? No. But it's now 1998.
Good.
Any idea what month it is? All right, have a look out the window.
No, it looks like about March, April, no, February, March, something like that.
It is April. You're
Yeah.
right first time, yeah.
Mm.
So whose birthday is it next month?
Mine.
Yeah.
And my brother.
Any idea how old you'll be?
93,000.
No.
No?
How old do you think really?
21.
No. How old do you really think? How old do you feel?
22.
You feel 22, and how old do you think you are?
67.
No.
No?
You really think? Do you really think you're 67?
I have no idea what it is. No clue. It could be 90 or 100, all I know about it.
Mm.
No difference in day and night, no dreams, nothing at all.
Do you think your hair's grey or
No,
white?
I've never seen it.
Never seen it.
But it's perfectly okay to guess.
Neuropsychologist Barbara Wilson has evaluated Clive's cognitive functions on 15 occasions since 1985.
So this is Barbara from the quote from the novel.
This is another front door. This is a stable door. Front door. Stable door. And a garage door. It's actually taken in Cambridge, that one. Okay. So one of those doors, Mr. Waring, you saw just now. Just, you willing to have a guess?
No, not at all. I can't remember anything. It's just like being dead, what I've had. I've never seen anything. You're just flipping over so fast I can't remember a thing.
Get anyone not more familiar?
No.
Guess.
They're all equally different. No idea what I was looking at just now. It's a waste of time.
Which one's most especially?
Nothing at all, none of them. None of them at all.
Okay, so this is what's known as a forced choice procedure. So Barbara is trying to test Clive Waring's memory. And very clearly, he has no explicit memory for seeing the pictures of the doors. It's like he said, it's as if I'm dead. You were just flipping pages. I don't even know, what occurred. But then two things were done. Number one, they they asked him to just guess, right? Just give it a guess, give it a guess. And the idea is that if there's any implicit memory of the doors or any non-explicit memory that is still intact, that could support the memory for this, if you give him a forced choice, then randomly he would have a 25% chance of picking the correct door. Any performance over 25 indicates that some memories are being formed. So if he could choose the correct door maybe 40% of the time, even though he said, you know what, I have no idea. And they're just like, well, point to one. And he's like, I don't know that one. If he's correct, higher than chance, it indicates that there's some form of memory that is being encoded. And when Barbara asked him, well, which one of these is more aesthetically pleasing, right? Which one of these do you find more aesthetically pleasing? She knows that one of the things that we find aesthetically pleasing is familiarity. So the more familiar we are with something, the better that something will look typically, right? So that has to do with processing fluency and a whole literature that explains that. But basically, the more familiar you are with something, the more aesthetically pleasing you will consider it. So she is trying to get around this question of memory and just saying, well, which one do you like the best? Which one do you think is the prettiest? And again, if he chooses the door that was shown before, that's another indication that explicit memory, totally gone, but at least some form of implicit memory can still be formed.
I can't remember what happened. My brain is not working enough.
Is there a page reflecting? Can you see?
Well, I think Clive Waring is unique. I've never known another person so amnesic as Clive. And I've probably seen about 700 brain injured people, most of them with memory impairment. He's definitely the most amnesic person I've ever known. I think it's a very dramatic illustration, particularly for the public, of what it's like to be without memory. For example, this constant feeling that he's just woken up, or he hasn't tasted anything before. And even if he's seen his own writing in his diaries or videotapes of himself, he acknowledges that it's him on the video, or him conducting, or him writing, his handwriting, but he says he wasn't conscious then. And the fact that he must have been conscious to have written or conducted, he won't accept it. Now that's, I've never seen that in any other amnesic people, even people with a very dense amnesia. They don't say, I wasn't awake then, or I wasn't conscious then. So I feel that aspect of it is more than the memory impairment. I think it's also very striking how his musical skills are intact. As far as we know, we haven't been able to do a formal evaluation of his music. Some people interested in the neuropsychology of music have heard his tapes or seen videotapes of him playing. And it certainly seems that his musical skills have not been affected by the illness. He may now be a little rusty and a bit slower because he's not practiced so much. So I think what that tells us about the functioning of the brain is that what's been damaged in Clive are not the areas concerned with music. Another interesting aspect about his deficits now are that he has quite significant semantic memory impairments as well as episodic memory impairments. So not only does he forget things that have just happened or that he's just seen, but he has to some extent lost his general knowledge about things. He doesn't know, for example, if he sees a photograph of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, he thinks they might have been in his choir. And it's very hard for him to tell you in any detail much information, even things he knew prior to the illness. He's been virtually unable to learn anything since the onset of the illness. And again, that's different from some amnesic people. There have been reports of a few who, despite a very severe episodic memory, have managed to learn new vocabulary, learn new acronyms like AIDS or whatever. And Clive by and large, hasn't learned anything. We were talking earlier today about the new information that he has acquired since the onset of his illness. And we think there might be 4 or 5 things. He will, if questioned appropriately, tell you about the reunification of Germany, about Hong Kong going back to China, about the breakup of the Soviet Union. Although if you ask him directly whether these things have happened, he'll say, I don't know. But the way we can find out that he does have some knowledge of that is because he says things like, has Hong Kong gone back to China yet, if you start talking about Hong Kong. But it's very, very tiny little bits of information, you know, given the extent that he watches television and he does get a daily newspaper.
All right, so just a real quick mention there. So can't remember who the Queen of England is, doesn't recognize the photograph, but would still know what a queen is, still knows what a piano is. So in that explicit memory that he still seems to have, in that semantic memory that he still seems to have, patterns of functioning like that, that would indicate that there has to be a split between facts and concepts, right? So facts like this is the Queen of England, Hong Kong separated from China, those are facts, but concepts are things like this is a piano, this is a desk, this is, you know, a computer. So the fact that he has those concepts still, but seems to have the facts gone, means that there has to be a difference in how your memory stores facts versus conceptual knowledge. I would say absolutely you can still be conditioned. So the fact that he doesn't even pause, right? So if somebody asks you, oh, can you remember when you were 2 years old? You wouldn't be like, no. You would be like, well, let me what's my earliest memory? I got, yeah, no, nothing, you know, 2 years old. You wouldn't just immediately say no. So clearly those questions have been asked, and he has this sort of procedural priming memory of, you know, just going, you know, I don't remember, I don't know, you know, I don't do this. One other really nice example of this kind of conditioning that can go through, especially emotional conditioning, or 2 of those examples, the people that he has encountered over time since his injury, but they're like regular people in his life, he acts more warmly towards them. So the doctor that was sitting down when Deborah brought in the pastries, and he's like, oh, great, we have enough for all 3 of us. You know, we have enough, right? He didn't see this person as a stranger that's intruding. He didn't, you know, turn to them and say, hey, you know, give me some time with my wife. This is a private, you know, conversation. So clearly he became familiar with that person, and then the good feelings that occur there. And then, yeah, that's a really, really good question. And my answer to that is, I don't know, and I would love to know if he could. So could he learn a novel concept? So the idea of a smartphone didn't exist in the 80s, right? I mean, cell phones, I don't know if you've ever seen cell phones from, I think, like the late 80s, but they're about the size of this projector here. So imagine holding this up to your ear and talking to somebody. That's what a cell phone was. Something like this was sci-fi, right, back in the 80s. So it would be really interesting, because one of the things that would, I think, massively help Clive would be a smartphone, right? Would be something that could just learn his days, learn his patterns, and then if he could procedurally, which we've seen that he can have that kind of procedural memory, just kind of learn that, okay, I'm gonna look at my phone and it says brush your teeth. And it'll be like, oh, okay, great. You know, I'll go brush my teeth and then I can check off that thing on my phone. Something like that I think would help him a lot. But can he learn that this is a smartphone and not just go, well, it's a black mirror, right? This is, I know mirrors and I know the color black, and this is, so would he be able, through any sort of learning, to be able to learn to say like, oh yeah, where's my smartphone? I need my smartphone, and learn what that concept is. So yeah, I mean, really good question. No idea if he could learn that, but it would, I mean, there are certain things that he can learn. So those 4 pieces of information, 4 or 5 pieces of information that somehow slipped in, it would be really interesting to kind of try to figure out how exactly did those get in there, because they shouldn't have, and yet somehow they did. So are they tied to very emotional things? Was he really involved in politics and world affairs? But because we know, again, that he can form some new memories, especially memories that are procedural, implicit, kind of emotional memories. So remember when the doctor was talking about how they have to monitor their conversation. We can't ask him, how is he today? Because that would imply that he remembers how he was yesterday, right? That guy mentioned that Clive does not like going to new towns. He doesn't like visiting local towns because they're new. And because they're new, there's no possible memory associations that he could possibly have for these places. However, the house that he lives in, they said, oh yeah, he enjoys walking in the garden. You know, he enjoys, you know, taking walks in the area. That was new at one point, right? He moved there about 7 years after his accident. So at some point that was new. And at some point he went walking through that meadow and probably hated it, probably felt uneasy, probably felt like, you know, this is a new place. I don't know where I am. I have no idea. Just all those kind of novel feelings. And then as that got repeated and repeated and repeated, implicitly, he got conditioned to enjoy that. Implicitly, some sort of familiarity got represented in his mind. And therefore now what used to be novel, this new house in this new place, is now comforting. He's been conditioned with those positive emotions associated to that new place. So there's a little bit more that we can wrap up, but I don't want to speed through it just in case there's a few other places where I want to mention some stuff. But any final thoughts on Waring and his ordeal and what he shows us about what memory is? All right, well, next time we will wrap up Clive Waring's story and just kind of see where the conclusion goes. But it is one of these, I mean, I don't love what happened to him, but I do find the story absolutely fascinating. Not just because it kind of shows us the different aspects of memory and provides good information for and good evidence for different substructures of memory, but just as a way of showing us just how fundamental memory is to being a human being and being a person, and just how important it is to have that through line to your life, right? So we have this idea of this continuous existence that we have, mostly because we remember a continuous existence in our life. And that's why something like losing 15 to 20 minutes after you have a cycling accident can really feel weird, because it's just this unbroken feeling of memory that almost makes us feel like we exist, like we have a self and we're not just floating in this world untethered, you know, to anything. And then the last idea I'll leave you with, that one neuropsychologist, don't remember his name, mentioned how Clive lost that part of his memory that not only allows him to remember his past, but allows him to project into his own future. So if you lose your ability to remember your past, you will also lose your ability to plan anything about your future. So all of you are in this real transitional phase. I'm assuming none of you are thinking to yourself, well, I'm at IUSB and I'm just going to stay here forever. This is probably a temporary thing. So most of you probably have plans. Most of you probably say, I'm going to do this next semester, and then after that, these, and then I'm going to graduate, and then hopefully I'll find a position in psychology, or maybe I'll go to grad school. Imagine none of that is possible. All of that is gone. How different would your life be if all you knew is that, yeah, I'm in this classroom right now, and that's about it. So we'll leave you with that thought, and that's all that we wanted to cover today. So next time we will continue our look at memory, but we will definitely finish up Clive Waring's story. But other than that, we are done for the day.